So the question comes, are you optimistic about the state of the world as you see it now? Okay, that's good. So you get your answer, right? Where is the sugar water, right? We all need to be optimistic in our life because we are going to live our life. This is the only life we have got. Okay? Can we go to the next slide, please? Do you think the state of the world is in crisis? Okay, majority thinks it's in the crisis. Can we go to the next one, please? What do you think are the top 5 crises in the world? Can you write down 5 top crises that you think we are in? People look really serious. That's great. So you can think, right, where you want to spend your life, the rest of the life. On what, right? You can make a choice. What crisis you want to solve. You don't want to live in crisis, right? Okay, that's what I wanted you to wake up. Oh, 3 more participants still typing. I want to give time. Yep, okay. Thank you. So, Arup, you have succeeded. Climate change is the bigger one, right? So everybody thinks. Okay. So what I'm going to present to you today is about a little bit, I also tried to follow, but then I have not made the slides so attractive as Arup did. So I got an idea what I do next time, right? But what I did is also, what is my take at this time? Because for past 40 years I have been researching in this field. So what is my take now? So where do I stand in terms of my understanding? So this is one of the biggest challenges the world is facing now. We have to take a decision globally, just not 1 or 2 countries. We have extracted only this much, right? So this is the historic emission. And this is, which is showing the IPCC assessment, assessing all the scientific literature, that whatever is in pipeline in terms of fossil fuel, we will be emitting this much more. But we have still more resources left under the ground. We have to decide not to extract any of them, not to bring out the carbon and burn it and throw it in the atmosphere. We have to take this decision. We should have taken a few years back, but we have not done. But this is something we have to take a decision. This is the big problem, right? And the problem is because we need to understand that each country have, since ever we started living on this earth consciously, we just felt that we can think of our own country, maybe my neighborhood, my county, and my city, and I can live well. But no. The problem is we never thought that there is something called global atmosphere. Anything goes wrong in that asset, which is a natural asset for us, then we will not be able to live better anywhere on earth. So this is extremely important. This is the global common asset which we are owning, each citizen of today, and will be owning in the future also. So what happens to that asset will determine how well we, and as Arup's favorites, who doesn't talk, the environmental non-human beings, how they would live. This is the most important question. We have never, why IPCC got Nobel Peace Prize in 2007? Because for the first time we could establish that this is an unprecedented challenge caused by human actions. So that was the assessment which really changed the world, and that's why while the other Nobel Prize came to the others, because this was established and then others were recognized. Now I was just thinking that, in this last IPCC report, what we could show is that why negotiations are not succeeding, why we are not stopping the fossil fuels. Different regions have different arguments, and what are these arguments? One is that each country is trying, or each region is trying to see, okay, this is, the greenhouse gases stay in the atmosphere for longer years, right? So if you emit something today, it stays for 100 years, thousands, going up to 1,000 years. So what it means is that for these, so if you see from 1850 to 2019, how much they have cumulatively added to the greenhouse gases, you can see the regional contribution, right? So from fossil fuel burning and from land use change, who has contributed how much? Then Southern Asia says that we have contributed only 4%, and North America has contributed 23%. So should we take the same responsibility of reduction? Or should there be a common but differentiated responsibility? So this is the question. And actually in Kyoto, it was decided that it will be common but differentiated responsibility, and that's what was following on. And if you look at the future of emission, then Asia, these red ones, Asia has the largest infrastructure, the biggest share of the global infrastructure on fossil fuel. So if we have to stop all fossil fuel today, it means that Asia will have to stop its assets. That means they have to, all fossil fuel assets they need to stop. Then the value of those assets becomes zero for them. So there lies the whole debate, right? Who contributed how much? How much is going to be the, so loss and gain, everybody is trying to see. So that is extremely important to understand. Then IPCC came up with this whole assessment. Again, I want to say that IPCC doesn't do any original research. It takes research from all research, just like what Arup was showing. So all of us who do individually, then this is it's not about prediction, it is about assessment. So how do you do a scientific meta-analysis and the scientific assessment? That's also a new science. And so what it is showing is that it is giving 4 options, right? It is saying that these are illustrative futures which they can see from the literature coming up. It says, well, the way we are growing now is here, that means resource and energy intensive, infrastructure, lifestyle and everything. And so which would mean by the turn of the century, we will need, if the emission has to go down like this to maintain the 1.5 degree warming level, then there will be need for a technology which will capture and store carbon under the ground, carbon capture and storage, and that amount is going to be this much. So there needs to be huge investment in carbon capture and storage. Some other scientists are showing, again with numbers and evidences, that let's think a little bit differently, and let's think that how we organize our societies, how we organize our infrastructure, how we organize our technologies. And in that case, they can equally show this 1.5 degrees Celsius stabilization by the turn of the century is possible without reducing our human well-being, but we need only afforestation and reforestation for sequestering carbon, and we do not need any big technologies, uncertain technologies at a scale which even scientists are not sure about whether this will be possible or not, right? So whether we act now, all these technologies we all know we can have. I mean, there are several examples which are given and which shows that it is possible. So the world again has to decide what kind of lifestyle, what kind of infrastructure, what kind of technology they want to invent, and they want to deploy and take off the shelf, give it to many countries. Technology transfer can happen, more collaboration can happen. It's not about competition, but about survival for the whole humanity. So do we go this P1 pathway, which we say that low energy demand pathway, or do we go very high energy demand pathway where we are pushing the future generation to a situation where they will have to decide whether this technology deployment of carbon capture and storage will be able to take out so much of carbon out of the atmosphere and still keep the warming level to the tolerance level in the sense of human and non-human existence. So this time in the last IPCC report, we said that we have to explore this demand side solution, where we showed that there may be all technologies we know and how can we deploy that. So what is the societal need? What is the policy need? What is the technology need? How can we do that? Can lifestyle changes introduced? So with that, what we tried to show is that by 2050, in each of these sectors, these white bars are showing that how much of decarbonization is needed. If you just think that fossil fuel and the supply side of energy, how much of decarbonization is needed. But these numbers are showing the demand side technology change, dietary choice, and all different kind of infrastructure access globally for each sector, we can reduce actually 40 to 70% from the demand side. And all these technologies are known. This can create a huge number of business all around, and these will be granular technologies. Everybody can participate in the whole process, can make business sense, and then reduce the burden on supply side decarbonization. Everybody is thinking how much we need to reduce the decarbonization, where is so much of fun, where is hydrogen, what can we do only on the supply side when everybody is thinking. Actually, it is not necessary. That's what we tried to show. And now the new planetary economics is also showing that actually we have to work on the demand side also, because if you have heard of the ecological footprint, carbon footprint and energy footprint, it shows that the demand for resources has gone beyond the supply capacity on the earth. So unless we work on the demand side, we will not be able to the planetary boundary resource constraints. So what we try to elaborate further is that in which sector what needs to be done, right? This is again based on all the scientists' work, and the assessment shows actually there are some socio-cultural issues which we need to address, but infrastructure, if we build right infrastructure, if we can have right kind of access to the end-use technology, right? So then we can, in every sector, we can reduce the burden of decarbonization need by 2050 from here to here. So we can reduce our decarbonization need by many more businesses, inclusive businesses, and many more sectoral technology deployment. And what we are saying here is that the future is going to be more electricity-based human activity and services. So in that, how much of electricity additional need is there is this much, but we can actually, through the demand side contribution, we can reduce the need for supply generation capacity addition just by granular technologies deployment in all the sectors. And these will be done in all these sectors. So with this new report, actually, there was a new awakening, I would say, in the policy and in each of the government that how they can do the demand side reduction, especially in Europe when they are facing the Ukraine war and they are facing the shortage of gas supply. So they are thinking in terms of what can be done in the demand side solutions. So what we try to show is that when we are trying to answer all these people who will really need to change this whole imbalance. And we all have roles to play in our different ways. So we as professionals is what we are doing. We are sharing with you the knowledge that what can be done, right? There should be role models who will be showing that what can be done differently. And also there are investors, citizens and consumers, which Arup was showing that how new professionals are coming, new businesses are coming, new startups are coming, right? And there are huge business possibilities as I showed in the granular technology development, and you can solve the problem. Then the other problem which we saw is that actually the consumption pattern globally among the people, right? So the top 1% consume, the top 1%'s consumption emits 15% of emission, and bottom 90% produces only 48% of emission, right? And if you add this, so this 10% includes all of us also. So we are actually producing, even we have, smaller share in the population, but we are having bigger share in the atmosphere, right? So these are the question of inequity, and we need to address this inequity. So the relevant research question after that we asked was that, so can we really solve the energy poverty by asking the question that we can reduce some of our per capita energy use in the wealthier section of the people who live everywhere in every country in different proportion. So can we find something that actually not so much of energy is actually needed? Maintain your human well-being. It's what do you want in life, right? We want some good services for our well-being. Even if we think that, then can we do this? So these were the questions. And if we can come up with some objective number, then we should not be subjectively saying that yes, they should reduce consumption and like that. So can we come up with something? So we did an exercise, and I'll just explain this. So what we did was that we took all the country data on these different parameters, right? So which defines the basic human well-being. And we saw that how much energy is used by all of them, and then we plotted against these well-being indicators. So what these red ones are showing, the nonlinear regression that we fitted, it shows that this is up to this point in each figure. You can see that how much you really need the energy to increase to give a better, say, prosperity or sanitation. How much energy do you need per capita per year? And you see that after that, actually the well-being doesn't increase. Well-being stays, there is a threshold, right? You do not need more and more and more energy for providing all these 9 parameters. So maximum is in terms of air quality maintenance, how much of energy might be needed. That's more than 100 gigajoule per capita per year. But then for others, you really do not need. So what does it mean? It means that there is more energy being used in different countries, maybe inefficiently, maybe wastefully, and that's why this well-being doesn't change. So it's not about, when I started my undergraduate days like you all, we were told that the more energy a country uses, the more prosperity the country is having. So everybody went on investing in energy use increase, and even wasteful energy use increase. So you used a very inefficient technology maybe for cooking, for driving, and so you needed more and more energy because that was the indicator for progress. But now, after 20-25 years, we started researching and we saw that that was a wrong hypothesis, wrong indicator for development, right? And so we see that now this is proven, we do not need so much of energy for providing human well-being, right? So basically, we saw that if we take in 2015, actually, how much was the global energy supply, then we saw that, in fact, 83 gigajoule per person would have been given to each of the individual on Earth if that was distributed equitably. And from our study, we know that we need only 75 gigajoule per capita per year. That means the Earth has enough energy, which we extracted in 2015, to meet the human well-being need for all 7 billion people, right? So it's the equity in distribution which really matters, which we need to be thinking of. For many years actually, the environmental economists, ecological economists have been trying to show that the income growth doesn't mean that your well-being increases, right? So this GDP growth, which is showing the GDP growth is a per capita income growth every year. And this index is showing how the social well-being is increasing. And if you see that after a while, after a level of income, actually for all the countries, social well-being goes down as income goes up and up and up. So up to a particular income level, you do need income to rise for your social well-being and economic well-being to go up. But we do not need rising income forever. But the growth models which we started long back that used to say that consumption and income has to grow monotonically. That was a wrong model that we were using. Now if you take the planetary boundary model, you can show that for well-being you do not need monotonically rising income or consumption. But again, I will come and say that, so what Arup was showing. So science have been there to say what needs to be done. But in society, in practice, we failed to do that. So we have to understand why socially we are in practice failing, and then why science we could not implement, right? So basically, there are several approaches how you maintain the sustainable consumption. Is we are talking about in one of our 2019 publication, what we tried to see that we really need to think in terms of well-living. Well-being is still very individualized concept. But what we are talking about is that how, as a whole, we can live better. It's not about just my well-being, right? So, Arup said he's bothered about the non-human beings. So, we are bothered about the human beings. So, it's just not about well-being of individuals, but well-living, collective well-living, how we can live better. And which has a very active role for humanity to play. So each one of us has a very active role to play, because in pandemic we saw that if someone else is suffering, that bothers me, right? I mean, I have seen many of my PhD students who delayed their PhD thesis writing because they wanted to go to the community to help those who are suffering. So it does bother. So if really there is like that kind of mass suffering happens, it does bother us. I can't be well-being. I can't think of my well-being, right? There were some people during pandemic also were having a fantastic life in the islands, hopping islands to islands, but that is the top 1%, 15% emitting to the atmosphere. But then others, 98%, they were suffering. So it was not well-living at that time. So if we think of well-living, then what we really need to think in terms of we are talking about the transformative change in the society, right? So what is that transformative change we need? Yes, new infrastructure, new business model, new technology, but also new consumption style, new living style. So how collective living, how community feeling, there's those we can bring in. Can we make those as new interesting business models? Yes. There are several examples in every sector these are coming up, right? So how do we think of those? And we really need to come out of many binaries, we say. And binaries like developed country, developing country, poor, rich. So in every country there are poor and there are rich, right? So we need to come out of these binaries which politicians have created. And we need to think socially, what are these binaries we need to be thinking? To us, when we wrote this, we felt that global south and global north is a social construct. It's not about the rich developed country. There are poor people in the developed countries as well. So can we talk of global north and global south as underprivileged who are living in every country, in every corner of the world? And can we address those questions, and let's see how we solve that, right? Sorry. So to me, I do not talk of degrowth. There are many researchers who are coming and saying that we really need to degrow. They actually do not mean degrowth, but they coined it in a very different way, so they are getting, criticism. But of course, as humanity, we want to survive, we want to revive, and we need to thrive. So what we need is that we want different growth. We need different businesses, right? Which helps in regrowth. Say we have denuded a forest, we have left behind a city which we discarded because we have left, deindustrialized that, right? But then we need regrowth in those. So we should not leave people behind. Then what we really need to do is revisit some of our fundamentals. And what are these fundamentals? In economic growth theory, as I said, when I studied, then it was said that what we need is we need to only look for investing money for creating physical capital or the man-made capital. So this chair is a physical capital, all these things are physical capital. So just count how much you are investing in physical capital, right? So we produced as much as we needed, and we went on buying things as much as we needed. We filled our wardrobes we filled our storerooms, we filled everything, but how many things we really use, right? So we need to be asking these questions. New ecological economic, environmental economic theories, then what we are saying, and planetary boundary, then what we need to be thinking is that we actually are saying that it's not about degrowth. How we invest in natural capital? Are we investing in regenerative agriculture? Are we investing in maintaining the soil quality? Are we investing in maintaining the air quality, water quality? So how we are investing in human capital, as Arup said, right? Sugar, water, or you are going to be a change maker, right? So what kind of training do we need for the students so that they can deliver change? And also, we need social capital where we need trustworthy governance system. I saw you wrote as a crisis the polarization. That means that's really not where social capital is building up. We are having a bad governance globally, and that is a crisis. And so as citizens, we need to see how we can get this social capital to raise voice and come to a better governance system. And then we need the natural knowledge capital. Arup was showing how his students are building up the baseline data to help to see whether Boston, how they can, we are all doing for our cities now that what they can do differently. And also what we are saying that yes, we do need physical capital, but we can question what kind of physical capital we need. Yes, we need early warning system, we need efficient buildings, we need railroad, we need water treatment plants, we need public transit system better. And so these are the things which we should be talking about, revisiting our fundamentals for sustaining prosperity, invest in productive base of the economy, and adopt regenerative processes or the businesses, you can say, right? So what we are saying is that, but still we found that there is more research is needed to assess. Suppose we are saying that we want to prevent pollution, right? We want community health care so that it prevents falling ill. Then the question is, we do not know yet what it means for the whole economy. So prevention of what kind and what is the communal well-living. So these are some of the research gaps in the social science which we really need more to happen to inform can be a just consumption for sustainable living. So these are the questions which we are working on, and so we wrote in annual review. As the editorial board, we always meet once in a while, and then we debate that we are inviting authors to write for us, but the question is, are we seeing how the world is? Can, as editorial board, we be silent reviewer of these reviews or not? So then we wrote that how we are seeing that the state of the natural capital, our generation has been enriched, but at the expense of the future generations. And so we are thinking that we need the scientific understanding and consensus are ahead how society currently operates, which Arup also said. And so basically we have taken some decisions, what kind of science and scientific papers we will be publishing, and how we can open it up for many more new ideas, and how we can work intergenerationally, because soon you will enter our shoes to see that whether you have done enough for future generation or not. So let's work together and see how we can solve the problem. As you know that there are, so you all are young scientists, so that's what Arup said, what we are devoting our time for. Someone can think that why should I spend so much of my time sleepless nights doing the research and everything. The question is, I can't have the sleep when everybody is going sleepless, right? So this is something which bothers us, and that's why that's nature. We should be thinking how we can think of collective prosperity. And as you know, the UNFCCC engages children in youth constituency now, and where I don't know how many of you know and whether you can join in there. It's a fantastic forum, I would say, because in the last COP I saw that they were really influencing the negotiations, and they were stopping the negotiations if they are not for future generation. So I would encourage you to go there. And you can look into changeframing.space, which during pandemic I started this web page. But then after pandemic, when I became busy again, I did not find enough time to keep it up to date. But then where we are saying, we are writing some of these blogs and the scientific information. So I always say that how you start your scientific journey by clear observation of what you see every day. And observation has a very important role to play to build new theories, new businesses, and new way forward and prosperity for humanity. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much. And we're opening for question answer. We can switch off that and we can go back to our dialogue. First, yeah. Question and answer. Arup, you need to come here too. At the back, Sira.
Thank you, Professor.
Is it on, the seat at the back? No.
Thank you, Professor, for this talk. I have a question for you.
You means you mean both of us, right?
Joyashree.
Yeah, Joyashree.
Yeah.
Joyashree. It's easy.
Yes, thank you. So, we're talking about how, from the university perspective, we need to also, take a step towards the sustainability. I just have a question, let me put it this way. How can a young generation resist the influence of a capitalist mindset that often creates unnecessary consumer needs, particularly in industries like fashion industry? What are your thoughts about that, especially for the young generation?
Not only for the young generation, I can also be a role model. I have stopped buying many. After I started writing all this, I rarely buy new clothing now. I look into my wardrobe and I say that, oh, I have such nice ones. Why should I buy one more and stack it up there? Numbers show goes against us. 10% of the women's wardrobe, if reduced, there will be huge reduction in emission. You don't need so much of production and consumption. We just need to think, We go to the stores and they're so cheap. We end up buying shop till you drop. We can come out of those mindsets, narratives, right? So this will be a lesson for the fast fashion industries, that they do not have to invest money in producing the same stuff which is not needed by the people. They can invest money for building the new information and sustainable consumption friendly products. So there is out there so much of money needed for producing planet friendly products. And everybody says there is no money, right? So we say that finance needs to be redirected. There is a financial crisis because this is going into the same direction. And that's something which consumers have a very important role to play to put a signal in the markets. Yes?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Joyashree. This is very, very interesting presentation. I have one question, because I'm from Indonesia, basically developing countries. So my question is how we blast our economic. You said that energy is not the only answer. Blasting energy is not the only answer to increase our GDP stuff. And with the problem like Indonesia, we have a lot of people there. we have a lot of water, a lot of natural resources there, and how we can manage. I mean, is that possible for us to manage to blasting our economy without, utilizing what we have, because we have very large gap for economic to catching up, become the developed country. Thank you.
Yeah, so my one question is that in the P1 pathway in IPCC report, we show that actually the consumption of the poor people, bottom 25% who doesn't have any access to the good life, that consumption will go up. But that can be done with most efficient technologies available in the world, right? Why we have to make them do the same thing which 100 years back we started with? We can give them the best technology and make them grow faster. But the consumption of those which I showed who have got their well-being, their energy consumption can reduce. Right? We have never talked this hard thing that consumption of some people has to go down. Right? I work in Indonesia on marine plastics, by the way, and Shatabdi works in that project. We are working in East Java and Bali. So basically in Indonesia there is so much, there are products which are coming up to substitute plastics, right? Bioplastics and many others. So you are making the economy ready for future, but we need policies, we need several interventions and citizens' involvement for making this to happen. It's possible. For each country we are doing right now trying to see whether India can produce city 100% from solar and wind, right? And we see that, interestingly, when we did not do this study, we did not know that in India, the solar and wind are potential or available in such a way, they are 100% complementary between day and night. And so you can make your transmission infrastructure such so that you can have 100% dependence on solar and wind. Still, you can sell your electricity at a lower cost than at what price you are selling today. We are doing the same exercise Firoz is doing, OPRO is doing for Thailand and Bangladesh now. And we did something for Pakistan where we showed that, very interestingly, what we saw is that in Pakistan, being a developing country, from agriculture sector, the emission is declining. And we were surprised to see this. That's why I said observation, data is very important, data science, very important. Right? You look into the evidence. And then we saw how come from agriculture sector in Pakistan, emission is declining and no one is talking about it. We found that all agricultural pump sets are now provided power from solar energy. It has completely become zero from irrigation in the emission. We suddenly saw from the transport sector in Pakistan, in 3 decades, the emission is coming down. We wanted to know what is happening. We saw that they have changed all their vehicles over 2 decades from diesel and gasoline to the CNG vehicles. And the emission came down. And they got that gas from domestically. Now they are making a transition to electric vehicles. So things are happening. I'm not saying that things are not happening. So I really like those who say we are pessimistic but optimistic too.
A couple of things to add here while you are thinking about your next question. And I really want the undergraduate students to ask questions, especially to her, since I'll be with you for a while. She won't, so please.
No, but if they ask you, then I hear the answers and my students hear your answers. So we need both.
Absolutely. But I just wanted to, a couple of things. So Joyashree was talking about non-binaries, right? So you have to be a bit careful. We don't necessarily want to make this a war against capitalism.
Yeah.
To your question, or communism. I mean, the moment you translate something to ism, there are always issues.
Exactly.
So question is, what is it? I mean, this is not against wealth creation. Right? This is also for equitable wealth and opportunity distribution. But you need to be able to do that. The other thing about Indonesia and any emerging economy is that, in general, there are exceptions. Right? There are people who always want to do things that are right or that are good across the world, and for communities that are disadvantaged. But in general, this is my feeling. I could be wrong. Nobody else will do it for you.
Yeah.
Unless you do it yourself. This, as we have seen it in the history of the US, in the history of the world, again and again and again. So if there are people, right, who sort of, in any country, yesterday we were talking about something in another context, that, okay, there are bigger floods, and in some hypothetical nation, and that hypothetical nation, the elites, doing very well, but just haven't invested for the ordinary people in terms of, dams, levees, protective infrastructures, lifeline infrastructures. And then anytime something happens, like the insurance companies used to say, act of God, hence I am not liable. Now they are saying, act of climate change, hence we are not liable as the elites of this country. We are corrupt, we have taken everything, we will not have done everything, but somebody else is responsible. We have to be careful, we have to avoid binaries. And it is, yes, certain countries, certain communities absolutely need to do something. But ultimately that has to come from those communities that, it is, to some extent, and it is just like respect is earned. This is earned, right, to a group. And then others do that.
I'll just give one more example, that 90% of the global freight movement, that is all goods and services which moves around the world, trade, is done in shipping. And the ships use not any country's territorial ocean route. They take an open ocean route, right? And 60% of the ocean is open ocean. Why? Because that is no one's ocean. And they are doing the trade, using the ocean, polluting the ocean, paying tax to no one. We just calculated, if you do a very little tax on these ships, they will become more efficient, and with that money, you can solve all the poverty in the world. Jeffrey Sachs once said, those who want to go to Mars and Moon and live there, I have no problem with them. Why they do not leave all their money behind for us to solve the global poverty?
Thank you, Professor, so much. It was a super interesting presentation. I have one question. There seem to be three main drivers that will lead us towards a sustainable future, being individuals' education, innovation in corporations and startups and what we're seeing, and then also policy and what's happening in government. Where do you see the biggest impact being in? Like, what bucket of that do you think that will lead us towards a sustainable future? And do you think there's a distinction between the countries that are like the US and countries that are already using so much energy, and then countries like Indonesia that are trying to catch up on that gap? Is there a difference between those two?
Okay, so if you look into the first thing, that which sector has maximum potential, now we are saying that, say, 20 years back, if we had said, then we would have said that industries are trying to do, then agriculture has enough potential where more efficient equipments can happen, sustainable agriculture can happen. Like that, we identify which sectors are leading and which sectors are falling behind, right? But now a time has come when we don't have that luxury. We are in a crisis moment when we have to explore all possibilities. That's why we are trying to see which sector has what potential and where we can act on. And what I showed in the demand side, actually dietary choice, food, there is huge potential, because if you convert to the dietary choice to sustainable consumption, like more plant-based, not all plant-based, more plant-based diet, nuts, fruits, etc., then you spare many land which might have been deforested, so you can reforest. So if you calculate it this way, then we say that through socio-cultural changes and dietary choices and sustainable consumption, you can have very high potential in the food sector. But also you have potential, the next highest is the transport sector. Because think of US cities, right? So it is all cities are built now. So they have been built in such a way so that people can have a car ownership, and that will be the lifestyle that was decided, right? But in other countries now, 70% of new cities are going to be built globally. 70% new cities are going to be built in next 20, 30 years. So there, you can plan it, design it differently. But what is happening is that multilateral funding agencies are following the same development template from 70 years back. And Arup's students, so when they are giving a new plan, they are not being taken because there is high vested interest. So how do we compete against through these policies? Just by saying that there is a power structure which is a vested interest, we can't solve it. We need to create new vested interest, right? New vested interest for sustainable living, sustainable production and consumption. So transport is the next highest, right? And then you can see that the buildings are another highest sector where you can have insulation and you can design your building in such a way so that you can have less emission. But we need to think in city scale. I'm talking about businesses and automobiles, but then you need to think of the scale now. So it's city scale. How can you design a city or a new town which is compact, which doesn't need so much of personal mobility? With a nice BART system, nice subway, you can make all your access to all the services, right? So these are the new things which are coming up. I would suggest what you can do is that actually all IPCC reports are downloadable freely. So maybe it will be interesting that don't get scared by the size of the volumes, but then just read one day each, one page, and just see that what these, in every sector it says what can be done. And this is something not IPCC is telling. This all scientists worldwide are saying, and this is an assessment which brings in one place, right? So I would say that spend at least 1% of your time. No, not 1%, 0.1% of your daily time for downloading the IPCC reports.
One other thing to add to that is,
So another thing, so I'm sorry, I'm just, because he said that what US and other countries can do. So I would say that yes, if you look into that cumulative emission which has happened, so in Kyoto it was common but differentiated responsibility. So it considered what is the historical emission that is accumulated and which is creating the problem. So the countries need to assume common but differentiated responsibility. So that still is there in the whole negotiation process.
Even if you think of countries or mindsets, right? So, and as you think of individual actions, ultimately for these things, collective action is what is going to make a big difference. So, hopefully these individual actions or some of these actions, right, will motivate a societal mindset. I mean, there were things that generations before used to do.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't do it anymore. Even today, in the US, in Thailand, I mean, across the world, there are places like, like Scandinavian countries, as we were discussing earlier, which have greater human development index, or at least equal, without consuming so much, right? Now, I'm not suggesting that it has to be the Scandinavian model. Each model has some issues, but there are already existing, at country scale, existing role models where you say, things like even taxes. Think of the US, our attitude is tax. Somebody, it's almost like somebody stealing my money, it's my money. Right? You talk to a Swedish guy, and many of them will say, guy or gal, and many of them will say, well, I don't mind giving you tax because that keeps my neighborhood safe. So would you rather, okay, it's all my money, but then you cannot go into the roads, you cannot, all those kind of things, versus, okay, there is some tax, it ensures certain kind of things, but ultimately it comes back to you, so what comes back to you? And how can each of these actions at individual scale, can it create a little bit of a change in mindset?
Another very interesting example from Thailand I'll give you, because here you are here and look at this, what this community thinks, right? During the pandemic, the number of incidents in Thailand was very minimum because their public health system, community health workers were all at work. That was what really made people conscious of this. And also another thing which I want to say is that as a country, Thailand has considered sufficiency in consumption, moderation in consumption, as their principle of life, right? And that they apply in their corporates, in their businesses, in their schools, in their teaching. So sufficiency economy is embedded in Thai economy. So this is our Sirau. I work with him on these, and we have been seeing how they have included this. France is now talking about sufficiency economy, but we have experienced that, how to do it and make it a policy also. So the world is saying sufficiency, how can I take someone else's liberty? But it's not about that. It's talking about how you live a better life for yourself and to your community. How do you do that? So they have these policies also in Thailand. And if you look into this paper which we wrote for well living, we actually gave examples from from Japan, from India, from Latin American countries and the indigenous communities where it was more life-fulfilling experience which they wanted. So what is that? So how you live with your nature, and that nature, how you live with your community and in harmony. And that community is not only your human community, but non-human community also, which they used to say in Latin America.
One thing that I think it was former President Obama who said that the arc of civilization goes towards justice. Hopefully it does. But one thing is, just philosophically, if you think religion versus, the kind of belief systems we have. I mean, at some point, Galileo had to say that, no, the earth doesn't move around the sun, right? Although it is said that he muttered, yet it moves, but officially he had to make statements. Nowadays, nobody of any religion or spiritual belief will have to say that. I mean, but it's okay, I mean, maybe there are some flat earthers, but very few. Now, I was talking about Catherine Day, and one of the major things that was mentioned in climate science is climate communication. So her husband is a pastor, and an evangelical pastor. She goes out to these churches and she says, look, your belief systems are not incompatible with what we need to do about climate, and here is why. So the other thing is never underestimate the value of communication. It's not a matter of, if you start communicating with somebody and you start with a fighting thing, right? You are wrong and I am right. We all know that doesn't. I'm always right. But if you start with, it doesn't have to be that. What is going on? And even, I tell my students, especially in this dialogue kind of class, that some of you might actually go into fields which are core. Something to do with climate science, engineering, economics, adaptation, policy, whatever. Some of you might. Some of you may go in fields where climate insights may guide what you do. Some of you will go into completely other areas. But maybe you'll go back to your Thanksgiving dinner table and have conversations. And even, in a non-confrontational, non-binary sort of way, you can say, okay, here is why. Here is what I learned. Here is what I've read. Here is why it's not conflicting with your core values. There's no conflict here. Right? Even that is a huge contribution. That may be one of the major contributions. Because that has the chance of changing mindsets. If you think about all the habits and things that the youth changed, caused to change across generations, this is one of the things that.
Yeah, and we also said, that literature exists to show, science has shown that habits are not fixed. They are malleable. We do change our habits, right? So if we look into those so now looking into the history and anthropology really helps, and understanding different communities, how they have survived different kind of stress. It's not that everywhere it was stress-free nature, right? So how they really survive. So if we look into those, then we see that we got a narrative that everything is fine, you don't have to worry about anything, you just go on living and enjoying. Right? We forgot to tell in the narrative that you also have to create something new, different. Now, the situation has come where science is showing we have to do it differently. So in a way I see this as a fantastic challenge that we have got so many things to do, otherwise we would have been lazy dogs, right? So now we have so many things to do. That's not sleeping at night is not a problem for me. Because I'm doing something, I'm writing something, something is getting changed. It's important. That's the life satisfying thing. Right? Okay, Shatabi, can we have one more slide up? That's the question, but then let's have one more slide up. And I ask you all, this is the last question. Can you read the QR code, please? And we would like to have your poll. Do you feel optimistic that with human agency, we can create a regenerative world and come out of this crisis, which you all mentioned earlier?
Okay, so can we have one question waiting?
The question is here, do you feel optimistic with human agency, we can create a regenerative world and come out of this crisis?
No, I think Earth was saying that there's somebody there has a question. We'll come back to that.
We'll come back to the question. We are not done yet. Just a break from monotony. It's interesting. So there are some good things that no, we cannot. It will be interesting to know why we cannot. Very good. Thank you. You can stop. What is your question? Yep.
So I want to thank you both for giving us the talks that you did. And my question is actually for both of you, as professors. So you teach students, and so when you're teaching students, do you think that there's a way that the way we teach the basics of things like economics need to change to fit?
A lot need to change.
Yeah, so like it seems like the one of the takeaways from your presentation is that specifically for economics, the idea of growth is good, period, is actually not the case. Growth is good until needs to be the way that we teach economics. So do you think, both of you, I can't say for engineering because I'm an economics student, I'm an engineering student, but do you think for economics and engineering that there are ways that we teach the base classes for these degrees that needs to change so that students take on mindsets that fit the world that we're going to face?
First, I would say in general, so there are research which is showing that basically our whole teaching pedagogy and the philosophy which has driven us in constructing the curriculum and all across all subjects since Industrial Revolution was that what we need is more competition. So we need to make competitive each one. So I need to compete with my peer so that I can go ahead, right? This competitive education. So that was something which we were told. So we always look for how I can surpass someone. But now we see that we need collective action, right? So we have never taught how to work collectively. We had all our homework, practice classes, everything competition. So that is a fundamental question which people are asking, and then they are trying to see how this can be included. Second thing is that every disciplinary teaching has its own lock-in, because not that everybody has the capability to deliver the amount of change that is needed. So capacity to teach new things does not exist in the world. So you need teachers' training for looking into these new things. So it is extremely important that these really happen faster. It's a very right question.
I would think, this is a question that I have thought about a lot. What needs to change? And you said economics and engineering. Even though I'm not in economics, I can clearly see there are things like this emphasis on growth, like you said, right? GDP versus this thing. That is there. Engineering, the answer is a bit more nuanced in a sense. So, at least as far as I think. By the way, I was just telling you here or earlier, I don't remember that, disciplines created in the 18th century in Europe or sometimes even earlier in places like Asia or somewhere else is not going to necessarily solve problems. Those disciplinary boundaries are not going to be enough for us to solve the great challenges of this century or beyond, right? So this I say here, in all the faculty meetings, whenever there is an opportunity, I keep on saying that sometimes it annoys people to mind, but it's, I think, needed. That being said, see, there are certain things. So we have this building by training a civil engineer. How the structure works, right, is not going to, you have to learn that. The basics of structural engineering, you have to learn that. The fact that, there is a reason why the sun rises in the east, etc., there's a reason, right? We have to understand that. And some people, there is this tendency, whether in the US or elsewhere, most Americans think this. And there is a place for that, right, in democratic nations and in all nations. But however most Americans may think, it will not make the sun rise in the west, or the structure get more, being able to withstand more. So there is value to learning certain core principles. Now that being said, let's say we have designed this structure for all the storms, or all the earthquakes and storms whatever that island has fixed, let's say. But now something is changing on us. What is changing has to do with societal action, has to do with nature, has to do with coupled human systems, engineered systems. Okay, now we need to consider that, and we therefore need to talk and understand those kind of things as well, right? Similarly, if we are entering into a stage where we are all wasteful, etc., so we use something designed for one purpose, for something it was not designed for, but should not be used for something, it will have disastrous consequences. And if we have to understand that, we have to go beyond our boundaries. So in engineering at least, we have to learn some basics. That has to be there. But we have to get beyond our own boundaries and understand what are the kind of change drivers that can come to engineering, what are the kind of things, the changes that engineering causes elsewhere, and then beyond engineering, how we can collectively get together and address a grand challenge or grand challenges of our generation, whether it's in one country or across the world.
I would say in economics, actually ecological economics, environmental economics, these have come up quite a bit now. So almost every university tries to teach that. So those are the things which are questioning the fundamental questions of the neoclassical approach. So it's going beyond that, and they are modernizing. Yes, at the back.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentations. You mentioned the importance of optimism a couple times, and at least in my experience, I think it's common for young people with a more optimistic perspective to often be dismissed as naive, especially when talking about change to those outside of the climate science community. I was wondering if you had any suggestions or thoughts on how to be able to take up space in conversations about change and when we're advocating for change, and how to be respected in those spaces.
Let me just tell you one thing, and then I think it's more for you to respond. But be persistent, not necessarily being confrontational, but be persistent and never give up, which is the same thing, but just saying it in two different ways. There were things that generations used to do, as I was saying, like all kinds of habits, whether it's smoking, whether it's this, whether it's that, right? Persistent, right? Which younger generations came up and said, you cannot do that. Mom, you died. Dad, you died. I don't want to be an orphan. Things like that, right? That change. And look at the US now, when things change. That doesn't mean, individually people will do whatever. That's perfectly fine. It's just not prevalent. It's just not something that will influence everybody else in your life. There are examples, right? So, I wish, now that I have all this gray hair, I wish age and so-called experience were a substitute for wisdom. It is not, trust me.
Mm-hmm. Now, another thing which I would say is that, I do sometimes now, if someone comes, if I give a gift, I have reduced giving material gifts, and if I give a gift, then I don't wrap it up, and I explain why. It's not needed, right? So it looks good. That's how we grew up. Why your birthday present has to be always wrapped and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped and wrapped. So these are simple things, but also there are many community exercises which you can do. So sometimes what we do is that if we set up a community and then we try to show that, okay, what is the energy consumption of this person, and so we start saying that, and we see that how people are using might be an interesting way to reduce their energy use. So some of these things we start talking, to start a conversation.
In terms of non-confrontation and so on and so forth, so many of you mentioned polarization, and we talked about echo chambers and all that. We should be able to get a little bit beyond that, and don't let them bother you. Let's say you enter a group or something, right, social media, whatever, which is completely antithetical to what you believe in. Most of the things that come at you will make you annoyed and upset. But as you think through that, if you can keep your equanimity, maybe even in some of those you can influence the conversation. So, some people tell me as a climate scientist, what do you feel when there are all these things about, even scientists sometimes, maybe who have not done climate that much, sometimes climate scientists, say, if they're skeptics, that's fine. The real skeptics, they are saying they're questioning the consensus because of some scientific notion. That's great, science progresses that way. But just deniers, they have to deny without any value. So one thing I say to some of my students, for example, and others, is that that's great. 99% of those I can immediately see and see they have no value, so fine. There are those 1% which gives me new hypotheses to examine. And I'll use that for my thing. So that's in terms of that. But then also, in terms of that gives me a sense of what is really bothering me. So if you say, for example, what is bothering me is, I have to give up all my wealth. I cannot keep anything for my kids or nephews or nieces or what have you. Climate change means you are taking everything from me. Immediately that person becomes defensive. There may be other reasons in some other cases, but getting to that and then gradually, understanding that and shifting that conversation and getting that comfort level while saying there is value to that. If you are persistent, there are so many examples where the youth have changed. It's not just so many examples where the youth have changed. It's almost universal that the youth comes and changes things. There are rare occurrences where some others are.
Yes.
Earlier you talked about how sustainable transportation in developing cities is really important. So I was just wondering, in existing cities where public transportation isn't very accessible or just not very good, how would you recommend from the individual scope you can be more sustainable, and also from the city's perspective, because I'm assuming it might not be very helpful to tear down the whole city and rebuild it. That's just unfeasible and would also cause a lot of emissions. So in that case, what are possible options to proceed?
I'll give you some examples. So you can retrofit a city, right? So because all the time you will see that your cities are also getting some part covered for some reconstruction or anything. So always there is some reconstruction in the cities, right? So this retrofit work can actually include that. I'll just give one example. I was in New York few months back, right? And then I was in a taxi to go from the train station to the hotel. And the cab driver was just so upset with the road. I said, why you were so upset? He said, can you look at this? Government is now building the walkable roads, cyclable roads, and they are giving free the cycles for the youths to rent, and they rent and they have taken our car lane. They could do it. They could retrofit it. They are making the city prepared for coming years, right? And I see that the young ones are just cycling and on the green side of the road, and the cab driver is unhappy, but then I said that, but then it might be good later on after this is built. No, I had so much of 6 lanes earlier now I have only 2 lanes. There is so congestion. I said that the number of cars will reduce maybe. He said, do you believe so? So these are some of the hopes. In pandemic, many cities actually repurposed their roads for walking and cycling. In South Korea, when they are building the new city, they are building it in such a way that you can walk on shade so that they have plantation plants accordingly. This is happening. But only thing is that the rate at which this is happening, it should be accelerated more.
Who asked this question? Olivia, you did, right? So, Diya, this is a good question and a great answer for when you influence Bapena. So she has a lot of influence, right, in the National Development Planning Ministry in Indonesia, right? So we'll go and we'll see that. So that Indonesia is one of maybe the only country which is that populous and having to ship in the modern world, its capital, Jakarta, from Jakarta to Nusantara. So exactly what you're saying. Still have to retrofit in Jakarta, but Nusantara is brand new. So that's a great conversation to have.
Yeah.
And
The
that's
one,
what we are thinking.
one more example for Indonesia, when we were doing our research, Shatabdi was looking into that how marine plastic can reduce ending up in the ocean. So we walked through all the lanes, the by-lanes and all, and we saw that actually if you just manage it upstream, then it doesn't go there, right? So we were looking into the government budget, being an economist, I was just seeing that how much money they spend on what and all. Very interestingly, our econometric analysis shows if you manage your plastics upstream, you can save 15% of your government budget annually. Because they give money for reconstruction of the flood, after flood, road construction, dams and all. Now, I looked into the different countries and tried to see that why roads, because in Indonesia they were saying that the roads are really bad, they are not built well, and every year I need the reconstruction that I hear back home in India also. So I found that in US, all roads are insured. So if a construction company builds it, not as per the building codes, like the road codes, they will not get insurance. In Indonesia, when I asked the government and others whether they have an insurance, they were falling from sky insurance for roads, right? So how you can frame your economy? So there are many good things to learn from other countries and many bad things to give up also from other countries.
We're open for more questions, but for the dialogue program assistants, he is my PhD student, is during lunch, if you can take, if you have a pen and paper or something, I would like each of you, at least here, to write or tell them just one sentence or a few words, even keywords, things that intrigue you the most. And maybe in one of our discussion, reflection sessions, I don't want to take time away from you when you have free time, so not today, after we go back, but maybe during, for example, we have this dinner on the board, right? Or some other time. I'd like each of you to discuss. I mean, this is more us talking, and some of you are asking questions, but I'd like to hear from each of you. So what we can do is we take some of those keywords from each of them, then we shuffle them and hand them to somebody else, right? And say, okay, Sarah has something, right, that she mentioned, but we sort of anonymize it and hand it over to another Sujal and say, what do you think about that, etc., right? So we do that. So that's all.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That would be really good. So what is the time now? 5 minutes more we have. We have 5 minutes. Does your watch show you the right time now? What's the time now? 42, 3 minutes more. Yeah.
Thank you, professors, for the interesting presentations. I guess in alignment with previous questions to do with climate communication, I saw that your presentations were very objectively statistics-based, and I was wondering how you guys navigated climate communication in terms of there has been the argument that objective climate communication without any hyperbole doesn't draw enough attention to climate action, and now we have people like Greta Thunberg claiming that inaction will lead us to the end of our world as we know it. I'm wondering how much hyperbole you think is necessary, or is hyperbole potentially deleterious in terms of inciting radical misaction per se?
In IPCC, after the IPCC reports are done, we go for dissemination and communication of the reports also, right? And we get training throughout these years, how to communicate science. And so, we are told that we should not distort the science, but we need to keep the scientific truth, right? And then try to answer the questions and then try to say what needs to be said, right? If there is 50% uncertainty, how do you communicate that, right? So you mean that, okay, like I go every day out and I know that it might rain, so I live with 50% uncertainty, but still I take a decision of taking an umbrella with me. So that's the kind of thing.
Yeah, so just to slightly elaborate on that, and then I'll also want to hear from you. Alarmism does not help. Right? Crying wolf too many times does not help. And as somebody very wise, much wiser than me, for example, said, you cannot fool all the people all the time. Now, the intent to fool may not be there sometimes. The intention may be very good, but you say things which, which goes so far beyond what we understand, it doesn't help. But I'll give you one. At some point, when I was in Oak Ridge Lab, I went to the Pentagon. I was asked to go there with a few people. I didn't realize there was this huge room like this. The entire room was filled with people from Department of Defense. And US Department of Defense, of course, not all the things that they do we necessarily like, but they also have a huge role in hazard and humanitarian aid and things like that. And they are big believers in this. They believe climate change is a threat multiplier. So I went there and I was there and I had done some work, so I was talking about that as the young guy. Not as young as you guys, but still young. And then we were talking, I was the one who was saying, this needs to be done. I was the one talking about uncertainty. And at some point I see this big chevron with so many stars gently, walking over to my table. And I say, okay, what's this guy going to say? He comes over, very deliberately, nicely comes and says, sun. And he didn't say it, there are ways to say it. He didn't say it in a way that, made you feel bad. It's very nice. Son, we understand there is uncertainty. We do not want you to minimize that. Please help us understand that. Characterize that as well as you can. Characterize uncertainty and its implications. However, remember one other thing. I and many of us here deal with more uncertainty than that on a daily basis. So give us the information, the full information, then we can deal with it in their work. It's often true in other work. So I don't think certain things are so bad and so much action needs to be taken. I don't think we need to be extra alarmist. At the same time, we have to convey what we have to convey, and we have to realize that sometimes uncertainty is difficult to process for human beings, right? I have heard things like, but asteroids can destroy us, so why take action in time? Okay, the banking system can crash, so your parents won't save for your college funds. So those kind of things. Sorry, you had You wanted to say something more?
Yeah, you guys pretty much addressed it, but I think I mentioned this to Professor Ganguly earlier in the trip that I do stuff to do with like ocean acidification and like natural buffers, and whenever we talk about these things, it's always in like 1,000-year time scales that just seem like unfeasible and like completely unrelated to us, and I feel like perhaps not attaching any hyperbole to that situation and completely just sticking to statistics might like dumb down the nature of climate change, and like in that situation would you say then like some hyperbole needs to be attached or still stick to statistics?
I'll just say one thing. So after the IPCC report of 2007, no, not that. So I was with the Nicholas Stern's review report also. So after that, we went to see the World Bank in India because we had some idea what needs to be done. So they said that, so what would you suggest? I just said a very simple thing. I see in my city World Bank giving money for drainage system building. And when I asked the municipality, they say that they are building these for amount of water which can flow through, right? And so they have a diameter of 30 centimeter, millimeter, something you will know better, the pipeline. But now that the amount of water due to the rain, intensity of rain, it will have to flow much larger amount in 1 second. So you need the diameter to be larger. So when you are giving a new construction company to build a drainage system, why don't you increase it to 33 or 35, which the civil engineers tell me that needs to be done. They said that we don't have additional money. So we told everyone needs to be there. But now they're doing that because all the cities are getting flooded because of the wrong drainage system, and they are not including the climate-induced heavy precipitation in a particular day, which the drainage system cannot take, and it will be flooded. So now they are thinking that how they can do that. It takes time sometimes, but it needs to be told by many people. They just don't want to listen to one people, right? So that's fantastic, right? We also try to testify, verify from many others. So that's okay. So many of us say the same thing. That's why I say we need the critical mass of the change maker.
Thank you.
So it's time for us to break for lunch.
I think let's break for lunch. I mean, when I listen to all your questions, I think that sometimes you think this 1 month is a long time. Sometimes I think even then it's too less. But go through these, in addition to the standard things we do like war games and so on, go through these as exercises. Talk with everyone else here and see, maybe you agree on many things. There are some things that you disagree on. How to talk about those things that you disagree on. How much, this kind of things you need, like where that change happens, and you change as a result of that conversation. Your
You become the role model.
Others change and all that happens. It will be interesting. Yes. So the interest of lunch, we don't want to be between you and lunch anymore. Thank you so much, and it's great that you participated. I'd like to hear from all of you.
And thank you very much to all of you. Thanks for bringing this whole team here, and these dialogues need to continue everywhere. I say that every day this has to happen everywhere.
Thanks so much for being
Thank
so
you.
well. Thank you.